today's video, we are going to answer the question, what happened to the ancient Greek and Roman gods? Thank you for joining me. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more videos. When you consider how the Jews still worship approximately the same gods as they did 3,000 years ago, and ditto the Hindus, it will seem that gods are durable, ineradicable cultural objects. Christians and Muslims routinely and famously prefer to die rather than give up their faiths. The classical gods were sure enough gods, while they lasted with temples and priests and followers. What then happened to them? Where are the followers of Zeus and Apollo? Did they just hang it up? Did isolated pockets hold out into more recent times? Were there martyrs, Maranos, sacred temples? Are they still worshipped under other names? Let's find out in this video. This is a question which has many answers. There is no true answer to the question, only ones which you feel are more or less convincing. These answers fall into categories: philosophical, historical, theological, and finally something which might be described as poetic virtual reality. I will start with the philosophical. What is a god? I will stick with the basic popular definition of a god as opposed to the Almighty God. This is a being, usually non-material, which has supernatural powers to direct and control reality, and with whom human beings can have a relationship. The concept of a god is still in our language, and if language defines reality, as many modern philosophers will say, then the gods have not ceased to exist. As long as language still names them, they still have existence. The philosopher then might ask, does a non-material entity exist if no one believes in it? If it is true that no one still believes in Zeus, does Zeus still exist? Just because it is named, does it have to exist? You can probably think of all sorts of things which people once named and believed in, which no longer exist. Are these things gone forever once they pass out of living human consciousness? An idealist philosopher would say yes. Once consciousness, which is our only way of interacting with the world, ceases to perceive or even remember something, then that thing might as well be gone for good. So, there is a philosophical way to conclude that if no one believes or thinks of Zeus and his kind anymore, then the old gods no longer exist. To say the gods are still around because they are part of written culture rather than living belief bring us back to the first answer, which is that they are part of language, and language along with culture creates reality. I will have much more to say about this later on in this video. A more fruitful way to explore whether the old gods still exist is to look at them from a historical standpoint. Classical scholars and archaeologists spend lifetimes uncovering and explaining to modern folks the relics and evidence of ancient civilizations. There is a great deal of material remaining, both in text and in ruins and artifacts, about the old Greeks and Roman gods and how they were worshipped. Text can explain not only how the ancients worshipped, but often how the ancients felt about their religion, those intangible factors which simple archaeology can't always reveal. Perhaps the most important thing to keep in mind about the history of religion is that ideas about God and gods has changed, and that different groups can view the same religion and deities in very different ways. Another thing that is important to realize when talking about ancient religions is that we in the modern world cannot help but see ancient religion through eyes conditioned by our own religious experience, which is almost always within the great Western monotheisms, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Given this, it is necessary to talk a bit about how ancient polytheists viewed their gods. We modern monotheists assume that if a god is divine, that God is divine everywhere and is the same everywhere. But in the ancient world, that wasn't necessarily true. For ancient believers, gods were often local and tribal. You worshipped any number of small local divinities, and if there was a major divinity shared by a region, such as Zeus, you might be more likely to worship the Zeus of your neighborhood rather than one universal Zeus. The same would go for the other gods and goddesses. Often, a local divinity would be conflicted with the major divinity so that your village or city had its own Diana, its own Venus, or other gods. Similarly, a god was thought to be the god only of an ethnic tribe or clan, and often was in conflict with the gods of other ethnic tribes and clans. You find this situation often in the early books of the Old Testament, where Yahweh, the one God of the Jews, was in historical reality not the one God of the universe, but only that of the Hebrew tribe in their struggle against the gods of other tribes. The quotes, "Thou shalt not have any other gods before me," doesn't mean the other gods didn't exist. It means that you should not worship them. The idea of a single universal divine entity, whether Zeus or another god, did existed in the ancient world. Quite early on, the pre-Socratic Greek philosophers of the 6th and the 5th centuries BCE speculated about a single principle or being, which would cover every divine and material phenomenon. And much more earlier, perhaps as early as 1500 BCE, in a far distant place, Central Asia, the prophet Zarathustra proclaimed his message of one supreme and universal God, Ahura Mazda, which means the wise Lord. This teaching became basics of Zoroastrian religion of Persia, which by 500 BCE has spread westward to the shores of the Mediterranean with the Persian Empire. It is likely that the early Greek philosophers of the Eastern Mediterranean had some knowledge of Zoroastrian teachings since they lived in Persian-occupied territory. From these beginnings, the ideas of universalist monotheists with one big God took root in Western civilization, but mainly among the learned and the philosophically minded. To a philosophical devotee, Zeus, Aphrodite, Artemis, the gods and goddesses of what are known as the Olympian pantheon were all manifestations of this one big impersonal God principle, transparent names and images rather than real beings. You went along with temple worship because it was a civic duty, but your own religious life dealt with the philosopher's abstract God. For the majority of the people throughout ancient times and up to the modern times, religion was not philosophical. You prayed to and worshipped the God of your home, your family, your clan, your tribe, or your region, without much thought to universalist big gods. The Olympian pantheon was important mainly for civic and imperial religion, big public ceremonies. Your own personal religion was not Olympian but local and personal. Only if you had a notion to join a mystery cult which featured fancy rites and a taste of esoteric philosophy along the lines of what would be called New Age nowadays would a lay person share the beliefs of the philosophers. Elsewhere on the borders of the Persian Empire, another religious change was taking place which would have major consequences for the development of the Western religion. In the 6th century BCE, the intellectuals and the elites of the Jewish people were taken into captivity in what is now Mesopotamia or Babylon, but was then Persian territory. These Jewish folks, despite their exile, survived in their new home, but their religion of necessity changed. The tribal God of the Hebrews had not protected them against conquest by a foreign power, and their temple, the only place where Yahweh could be properly worshipped, had been destroyed. How could they sing Yahweh hymns in the pagan country, as in Psalm 137? The Jewish faith changed forever in exile. They began to conceive of God not just as a tribal protector, but as a single universal divinity which would bring justice to all nations. And this God could be worshipped anywhere with songs of praise and prayer, rather than just sacrifices in a single temple. This universalist monotheism and many other aspects which will resurface in later Judaism and Christianity was also influenced by the Persian religion of Zarathustra, which the Jewish exiles encountered. Jews and Zoroastrians were both monotheists in a polytheist world, and Zoroastrians had found a way to reconcile the one God with the many gods of the polytheists. Though Ahura Mazda was the single supreme god, the pagan gods of the Indo-Iranians had been recycled into Yezatas, semi-divine beings created by the one god to serve him in the battle against evil. Thus, the Persians reconciled the one with the many. Jews were present in many of the cities of the ancient Mediterranean, especially in Roman times, but they were in general not an aggressively proselytizing lot. But when Christianity hit the scene, the religious balance of power began to change. Christianity brought with it the universalist monotheism of Judaism, the good or evil dualism of Zoroastrianism, and a level of aggressive missionary zeal which was new to the ancient world. Among pagans, literally, those from the countryside, gods tend to be interchangeable and blendable. It was believed that your Zeus, for example, was close enough to my Zeus, so that we were probably worshipping the same deity. And if you came from a different culture, as happened in Asia Minor, when Persian and Greek met, your sun god Mitra is the same as my sun god Apollo. So, there weren't too many religious wars in the ancient world. You could always reconcile one god with another, or even put them together, as the Greeks did in Egypt when they blended Greek and Egyptian gods in Hellenistic times. But when the Christians came on the scene, they believed that the other gods were not only not to be worshipped, but were evil and needed to be destroyed. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, for a universal rather than a tribal god meant that no other god was worth worshipping. By the 4th century CE, Christianity had become the state's religion of the Roman Empire and was enforced throughout the empire, even though many people still held out for their pagan gods. Those who did, interestingly, often were philosophical intellectual types who believed in that universal abstract God, that they didn't need another universal God, they already had one. In the pagan countryside, the locals accepted Christianity and then promptly went back to worshipping their local godlings. This last bit is important for finally answering the question, where did the old gods go? Remember that Zoroastrians, despite Zarathustra's admonishment in his original scripture to reject other gods and worship only Ahura Mazda, had found a way to re-assimilate the old gods into the new religion as angel or guardian spirits. This process of assimilation went on in newly Christianized Europe and continues to go on wherever the great monotheism have spread. Despite the official fulminations about only one God, one way, other gods are demons. Most of the Christianized world has assimilated its original local pagan divinities and rites into the newer religion, and has done so in the Mediterranean for almost 2,000 years. You can still see in Greece and Italy little shrines in the countryside or other cities with a statue of the Virgin Mary or a saint in them, and sometimes flowers and candles offered by worshippers. These things that have changed about these shrines after the advent of Christianity is the name of the divinity, the appearance of the statue, and the nature of the ritual Usually, Christians don't sacrifice animals anymore. Similarly, with the local cults of various saints, it is almost likely that before the saints came along, that local cult was devoted to a local god. This is true in Islam as well. Despite the essential belief of Islam that there is but one God, Allah, the Islamic world contains many holy sites where miracles took place or where saints are buried. Mediterranean people are practical. They go along with whatever religion works as long as they don't have to change their ways too much. Therefore, those who might have worshipped Diana or Venus in Roman time now put their flowers in the front of the statues of the Virgin Mary. It is Mary who is their helper now, but the goddess concept is still very much lurking underneath that blue robe, even if a peasant believer would be horrified if you suggested that she was doing something other than Christian. Even the learned clergy and theologians of some Christian denominations admit that many goddess figures worshipped all over the Mediterranean were assimilated into the figure of the Virgin Mary. So, where did the old gods go? From a historical point of view, they didn't go anywhere. They just changed their names and their appearance and continue to be worshipped by devotees under their new guise. I have seen in Rome, for instance, a majestic statue of the Virgin Mary called the Madonna del Parto, Madonna of Birth, which consists of a Roman marble statue of the goddess Juno with a Renaissance head of Mary replacing the old goddess head. Women still come to this statue to pray for children and easy birth, as they have done for 2,000 years, whether it was Juno or Mary. However, as modernization spread through the world and religion in general wants as an influence, at least in Europe, these pagan survivals are disappearing. In the United States of America, the Protestantism of the white settlers did not have a popular, though officially forbidden, habit of assimilating native or aboriginal features as the Catholicism of Europe and South America did. Are the gods, if one can talk of gods, of the ancient Native Americans still alive? We are left with the same question we asked in the beginning. After 2,000 years of assimilation, which may now be coming to an end with the spread of rationalistic modernism, at least in Europe, which recognizes no God or God at all, or intolerant evangelicalism, which wishes to destroy all gods rather than recycle them. Where did the old gods go? To bring us to another group of answers, we must leave history and go to theology. Theology, rather than economics, is the dismal answer. I find few things less conducive to religious inspiration than studying theology, but like economics, it can tell us a great deal. Thank you for watching. See you in part 2 of this video. Kindly subscribe and enable notification so that you will get this update and many other videos to come.